All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here are doing our 2022 preview and prediction for the Clemson Tigers. Dabo Swinney, he's coming back for his 15th year, 130-36 record as the Tigers' lead man. Brandon Streeter and Wes Goodwin, these guys take over as the coordinators. Strange year for Clemson. Tony Elliott and Brent Venables both waited a long time to take the right jobs. It just so happens to be in a down year for Clemson. Very odd timing. They're 14th ranked recruiting class as well, so it's been a very bumpy last 12 months for the Clemson Tigers. What are your thoughts on the turnover on the staff?
I honestly thought Brent Venables would take a job this offseason. It seemed like there were too many great programs looking for head coaches for him to stay, considering he waited forever for a job. He was constantly linked with new jobs, but he stuck it out at Clemson and just built a dominant defense for years. He takes the Oklahoma job, which I think is a perfect fit and probably one of the best hires this offseason. Tony Elliott taking the Virginia job kind of blindsided me. I didn't really figure he would take the job, and especially I didn't think he would stay in conference. But he heads across to Virginia, Charlottesville. I think that's also an interesting fit. I like what he can do. This will be interesting for me because some people believe that Dabo Swinney was built by his coordinators and relies on them heavily. Interesting to see if he can do with these two new guys in Streeter and Goodwin. I think Goodwin is the more intriguing of the pair, 37 years old, first year as a DC. I like to see that, but he can do. But also, the Tigers have just not been recruiting very well. You and I have discussed their recruiting classes at length in some discussions, and we just feel like this is not the Clemson standard, especially on offense. The talent there is just not really coming in like it used to be. The defense seems to be putting together a decent recruiting class. It's interesting to see if Dabo Swinney can kind of rebound from what was a pretty poor season by Clemson standards. Playing in the Cheez-It Bowl is not what most Tiger fans want to do when they start the season. So it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of rebuild and rebound this team.
Not a rebuild, just a disappointing year, I think. Brandon Streeter, QB coach since 2015. He gets that lead job here as the play caller. Then Wes Goodwin, I really like him. A graduate assistant at Clemson in 2009 through 2011. Left for the Cardinals in 2014. He came back in 2018, so he's been around these guys for a long time. High-energy guy. Seems to have a great football IQ. I think he's going to do a phenomenal job in that DC role. Very impressed with what he did in that Cheez-It Bowl when he was the one calling the plays. Like you said, the offensive recruiting has not been great over the last 3 years. Disagree if you want, but they aren't stacking up like these other elite programs. Only 5 players in the class of 2022 on offense are ranked. Bama, for example, they had 6 in the top 60. That's just not good. And you mix that with DJ Uyunglele, who was brutal last season. The 2 games he had in 2020, he was phenomenal when he was replacing Trevor Lawrence. And they didn't have a running game against Notre Dame, and he still put up 400-plus yards. He was dicing it all over the field. It's weird the fall off he had because he had those 2 great games, and then last year, chemistry, accuracy. In the bowl game, they didn't attempt any deep passing plays one bit. The confidence just was not there. End of the year with more picks than touchdowns, 176 yards per game. DJ was brutal, but Cade Klubnik, Dabo will not hesitate to start him. The 6th overall ranked recruit, number 1 quarterback, incoming true freshman, good in the pocket, great touch and accuracy. He can make any throw, very confident. And like I said, we've seen before, Kelly Bryant was not a bad quarterback, but he was not the guy they take him to the promised land. They put Trevor Lawrence in before, I think it was even the end of September. DJ will start the season, but if he struggles, Cade will be in his rearview mirror. He'll be the starter very quickly in 2022.
DJ disappointed me so much last year. He was one of my favorites for the Heisman early on. I thought he had serious potential. I loved the game film against Boston College, especially the Notre Dame game film as well was very solid. But look at that BC film from 2020 when he came in for Trevor Lawrence during the COVID incident. I thought that he just had the potential to take over, and it did not look like it was going to work following that week 1 loss to Georgia, and just continued to unravel. 55.6% completion percentage, 9 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Just not good enough for a quarterback at Clemson. And like you said, when they have a guy like Klubnik, who is a super high recruit coming in, Dabo will not hesitate to pull the trigger. If DJ struggles early on, if he has a tough September, we could see a quarterback change very quickly, considering the schedule is not very strong in September. If DJ's struggling, we could see Klubnik in there before October.
The running game also needed to be a little bit better. 168 yards per game. Travis Etienne, the departure of him, they lost a lot of explosiveness. They only had 3 200-yard games on the season. 2 in a row to end the regular season against Wake Forest and South Carolina. Those were really impressive efforts. Will Shipley's a slice and dice runner. Kobe Pace, he's the more physical of the 2. I like this dual threat attack they got at running back. Tony Elliott stuck to the play calling that was working the final 2 weeks. I really like what they did against Wake Forest. I picked them to win that game, and they could not be stopped on the ground. They had over 6 yards per carry in both of those. It took them forever, it seemed, to find the formula, but they finally found it. And, they struggled mainly because of this offensive line. Obviously, the explosiveness of ATN, that's a big loss, but I remember against Georgia, I picked them to win that game. I acknowledged that they were at a big disadvantage on the interior, but I thought they would get to the edge with their running game and try to, throw that interior D-line off. They didn't attempt to do that one bit in that game, and then we scored 3 points. The offensive line throughout the year was terrible. They were very beat up. 2022 is a fresh start for this unit. Depth was a big problem last year. Brock Horst, he was disappointing and tore an ACL to end his Clemson career, so that's unfortunate. Jordan McFadden, though, he had a great season. Parks, he was a solid run blocker. And Tristan Lee, a former 5-star, might get in the lineup. I think they're pretty good at tackle. Inside is the question mark, though. For example, they had 3 yards per carry on 43 attempts against UConn, a game they won convincingly. Travis Jones, of course, that's who they went up against, and it's almost like he single-handedly demolished this high-end elite program's interior offensive line. Will Putnam at right guard, I think he's the best there on the interior. Marcus Tate, I like him. He's versatile, 6'5", 325, but I'm still very concerned, even with Mason Trotter, a veteran at center. We got guys coming back, but they were terrible on the inside last year.
I definitely agree that the left and right tackle are the standouts in the offensive line. Jordan McFadden, he had such a great season last year. Kind of stood out for me on what was a pretty poor offensive line. Trotter at center, the junior, going to be a bit of a leader. Will Putnam as well as senior coming back at right guard. I think he has some potential. Tristan Lee, I think he's a wild card, like you said, former 5-star recruit. Maybe he gets in at some point. They might have to switch his position, maybe move him around on the offensive line, because I think the right tackle is just locked up with Walker Parks. And on the depth chart, like Tristan Lee is listed as a right tackle. The offensive line is definitely going to need to improve to give Shipley and Pace some opportunities to pick up on the ground. Shipley looked a little bit better of the two last year, but I think both these guys, if they can balance the run, two-headed monster. I like what they can do. Shipley especially, I think he's a very talented running back.
Yeah, I think Will Putnam might get moved to center. We'll see what happens. I just was not thrilled with those offensive line. That's never really been a strong suit for Clemson over the last couple of years. I'm not out here putting guys left and right. Of course, Jackson Carman did just get drafted, but he was also a 5-star coming out of high school. So, he did what he was supposed to. Looking at pass catcher, another area of concern for this offense. Joseph Nagata, 6'3", 220, catching traffic. He's probably their best playmaker. E.J. Williams, Justin Ross's former high school teammate down there in Phoenix City. Good hands. He's also a contested catch guy. Dakari Collins, Bo Collins, those are some young guys that might step up. Frank Ladson transfers out. If Nagata and Williams are healthy this year, I like that duo. And I like their starting lineup here at receiver. And Davis Allen at tight end coming back. That's big news for them. Overall, though, maybe Brandon Spector or Trey Stiletto get involved. Overall, I'm not high on this receiving core because the talent is just not there like these other programs.
I think Spector has some serious potential. I like what he can do. Maybe they get him involved early. Bo Collins as well. I like what he can do as sort of an interesting kind of player, younger guy, get some experience. E.J. Williams, definitely has the upside. Like you said, teammates Justin Ross in high school. He has some serious upside, but like you said, the talent is just not really there compared to the other teams, other big teams in college football. We just previewed Alabama recently, and they have a lot more talent on wide receiver, even if they are some new faces in Tuscaloosa. I just think that this wide receiver core is not quite up to the standard for Clemson. That a lot of it comes down to recruiting, which has just been poor recently.
Joy also transferred out, so it's obviously been pretty interesting to see what's been going on with this core because they've not been stocking up, like I said, and Alabama has. Looking at the defense, Wes Goodwin takes over. I mentioned him at the top of the show. High energy, high IQ guy. They were second in points per game allowed last year at 14.8. I think his defense was overlooked by how bad the offense was. The front four is absolutely loaded. The injuries allowed these guys to step up. Some of the other guys like Rook. I like Williams and Davis. They're both 6'2", 300 pounds. Brian Brissy, back from a torn ACL. Great hands, 300 pounds. You hope that the explosiveness is still the same. If it is, him and Tyler Davis on the interior, these guys are going to be rock solid. And then you look at Xavier Thomas, who's been kind of disappointing. Of course, he missed the entire year because of COVID in 21, played 7 games in 20. He's never been great outside of his freshman year, but the talent is still there. Miles Murphy, I love this guy. 14 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, fights hard, strong upper body. Recognition versus the run is top-notch. And then KJ Henry, another guy who's never been great, but him and Thomas, former 5-stars. They're absolutely stacked on the defensive line. What are your expectations for them heading into 2022?
I absolutely love this defensive line. They're so talented here. There's so many guys that are not going to really even get a look in because the depth is there. Greg Williams as well. I think he has some potential. Xavier Thomas, like you said, missed season due to COVID. He comes back. We'll see what he can do. I like his speed. I like what he can do on the defensive line. Looking at Davis as well, I think he has a lot of potential. He's a senior leader for this team. He's experienced. He's played a lot of snaps. He's the guy I'm looking for to lead this defensive line.
The middle of the defense features 2 new names, Jeremiah Trotter and Barrett Carter. Trotter, 5th-ranked linebacker, similar qualities to that of Carter, flexible in coverage with instincts and physicality. Carter's probably the better pass rusher of the two. He might be more of a pass rusher than a traditional linebacker because he's got 4.5 speed at 6'1", 225. That's pretty ridiculous. He was the 3rd-ranked inside linebacker in his class. Trent Simpson, though, this guy is not a new face. This guy has been around quite a bit. He's been very good. Hybrid role, great pursuit, 12 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. very fast. They blitzed him a lot, the ability to stunt, and his ability as a good open field tackler. They've used him in a variety of different roles. I'm very interested to see what Wes Goodwin does with him. Venables always has a hybrid player like this. Remember Isaiah Simmons a couple years back. Simpson is him, but a lot faster. Breakout season for him. He should be a first-team All-American this fall.
I'd love to see Trenton Simpson on the blitz. I think that's going to be great for him. He has some serious potential there. And like you said, first-team All-American is definitely within reach for this guy.
Looking at the secondary, I wasn't a big fan of the secondary last year. Picked them to lose the Pitt before that game solely because of the back end. I specifically pointed out Nolan Turner as a liability, and guess what? He got beat for a touchdown. It's not great when you can pinpoint who's going to get beat. He's now gone. They weren't awful by any means. The only team in the ACC to have more picks than touchdowns allowed. And truthfully, only times they struggled were versus teams you'd expect them to, like Pitt, Wake Forest, who was coming from behind, NC State. They weren't getting slashed either. They weren't getting beat up by poor passing attacks. Outside of BC, that was kind of shocking. Dennis Grissel, he's terrible and had a great game that day. They do lose 3 starters. What are your expectations for a secondary that does return a guy like Andrew Macumba, who was phenomenal in his freshman season? A prototypical safety. He can play in the box. 9 pass breakups last year. Breaks on the ball well. I think they got some interesting players here. Well, what are your first thoughts?
I like Macumba. 47 total tackles last year. 2 tackles for loss plus a sack. I like what he can do. 7 pass defenses, pass breakups. Very talented player. He has also had a forced fumble last year as well. He's a talented player. He steps up. He's a bit of a rising star on this offense, on this defense.
I like what they got at corner. Nate Wiggins, Sheridan Jones, 2 veterans. Well, not so much Wiggins, but Jones, he's a senior leader. Dabo hyped for the year he might have. Wiggins, he's a pure athlete, a guy that should have no issues in man coverage. Might even find some time at safety. They did bring in 2 high-ranked corners in the class of 2022. Taranio Pride Jr., he's the first one, and then Sherrod Colville Jr. They might find some time somewhere. I like what they have in the secondary. I love what they have on defense as a whole. 15 points per game last year. It's going to be tough to replicate with Clemson year after year. I showcase they can do that. Even with how much they were on the field. They're on the field a lot this past season. I expect tremendous improvement.
I think Pride has some serious potential. 5-star coming in. I think he can make some impacts early on. Maybe slot him in a corner somewhere. Nate Wiggins, like you said, I love the athleticism with him. A bit of a younger guy who's got some good snaps so far in his career.
Yeah, for example, 96 plays against NC State and only allowed 386 yards. That is elite defense to be on the field that much and to give up less than 400 yards. They went to overtime in that game. That's just ridiculous stuff for them. They did end up losing that contest, but their offense did not. I think they had like 7 straight 3-and-outs or something. They had counted on the broadcast. It was ridiculous. So Clemson's defense, they're obviously going to be a great unit, but the offense is going to be the key. Looking at the schedule preview and the prediction for Clemson, I think it's a clean sweep, 4-0 to start off the year. I have them going 10-2, losing at home to NC State and dropping one on the road at Notre Dame. I think this team could certainly be 12-0, but I'm just very concerned with the offense, the interior D-line, O-line rather. I focused on them a lot when we were on the offense, the receiving core. I think they got guys that will step up, but the lack of depth is certainly concerning. I think Cade Klubnik, he will probably get involved in one way or another. I really don't know what to expect from this quarterback group. How DJ plays, the potential is clearly there, but his leash is not very long, and that could be not good either, that he gets on the field this early. So I'm going to go with 10-2, 7-1 in the conference. On the road to Notre Dame, again, I think they lose that one, but the defense, I think they're going to be elite. One of the top 3 defenses in the nation, but what will their offense give them? It's just too tough to try and predict.
I'm going to go with 9-3. I think they will lose to South Carolina. That is the one game that I'm going to add on for a loss for them because I just worry about the offense. I think South Carolina's offense will be better than Clemson's offense this year, and I think that they could find themselves in a hole early on against the Gamecocks, and they'll struggle to get themselves out of it. We don't really know what to expect with the wide receiving core and the offensive line. We touched at length on the interior offensive line. That is a huge concern for you and I. I don't know if they're going to be able to protect the quarterback, whether or not it's DJ or Klubnik. It doesn't matter who it's going to be. If they're not protected, they're not going to be able to make plays if they're on the ground. They have to be standing up to be able to make plays. I think Klubnik will definitely get in by October. The leash is super short on DJ unless he comes out and absolutely beats out the show and just has a star-stopping performance against Georgia Tech, Furman, and Louisiana Tech in September. He can find himself out of a job very early. Traveling to Notre Dame, playing in South Bend is always going to be difficult. I think 9-3 is right where this Clemson team belongs, which is definitely an improvement from last year, but not where Clemson fans want to be.
And in performances against those first few opponents, they're not going to be contests one bit. They're going to blow them all out. But still, last year, 47% completion rate against UConn. Those are important games. Only 58% against South Carolina State. So obviously they're not going to be tough tests. But like you said, he does need to perform well in those games, or he might get benched because he was not good against bad opponents last year. So I'm going to go 10-2. I think easily 12-0 that was on the table if they can figure things out on offense. I love Dabo, but this is a really big year for him because both of his coordinators are gone. The offensive recruiting has not been up to par, so I'm going to go 10-2 with the potential to go 12-0 and be a playoff lock. So we'll see what happens. I like Clemson. I don't love them, but I do think that the potential is certainly there. So we'll see what happens with Clemson. That's going to be it for today's episode. Nick, as always, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's going to be it, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.